Hello, my name is Margaret. I am a single mother living in Burbank, California. When I was 27 years old, I had my first and only child, Evan, and that's when my life truly started. This is my Draw My Life, an apparent story with a child with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. For years, he seemed to be developing normally. We were so happy. Around age 3, I noticed subtle changes in his movements. I noticed that when he was walking on his toes around the house, when he entered preschool, I noticed that he would have a hard time keeping up with the other kids. He struggled running around and keeping up in pace during recess. He complained of pain, and I thought it was just growing pains, such as shin splints. When I took him into our primary care doctor, the doctor continuously said the same things. He was fine, and it was all normal, of course, but Evan continued to feel pain, and I noticed he was still struggling to walk around. It seemed as if these pains were getting worse. I knew that in my gut it was not normal. So I took him back to the doctor and demanded answers. That's when he recommended us to a specialist at Stanford, since he was not confident with his initial diagnosis. This reference was terrifying. Evan had been complaining of this pain for years, and I felt that I had failed him by not doing more sooner. We had to fly up there as Evan could not stay in the car for that long. It was uncomfortable. As we reached Stanford Medicine, we were met with a team of neuromuscular doctors. The doctors there shared my concern and took us seriously from the first visit. They were informative, supportive, and we've been there ever since. And thus, advanced testing began. Following EMGs, lab tests, biopsies, MRIs, EKGs, and even genetic testing, Evan was finally diagnosed with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy type 1B. Having answers was great, but knowing my baby would struggle throughout his whole life destroyed me. He began going to physical therapy regularly and occasionally getting his lungs and heart checked. Every night we stretched before bed and he took his medicine. Mainly, it just made him more comfortable, but there's no disease-modifying treatment for LGMD. Even with medicine, though, Evan's behavior and strength continued to be an issue. As his behavior and strength became a bigger issue, he started to develop depression, especially after his diagnosis of LGMD. As a family, we entered a state of grief for a few months, while we had to organize a way to manage our finances and treatment plans for my son. To check if this was normal, I did some research online and found that most patients that are affected with LGMD and other muscular dystrophies actually are more likely to develop one lifetime psychiatric disorder compared to other patient populations, which was oddly relieving to hear that other people can relate to this disease progression. However, research also showed that some people going through LGMD actually believe that the mental burden of going through this progressive disease is harder than the physical regression of their bodies, which makes me want to focus more on his mental health along with his physical health. His worsening condition, where he loses muscle function in his limbs, like his hands and calves, cause greater frustration and actually impairs his own personal body image and causes emotional distress. It does not help that LGMD contributes to fatigability, sleep disturbance, decreased facial expression, decreased initiation, and muscle weakness that make it more frustrating. My son had more trouble performing his normal daily activities like washing, dressing, feeding himself, especially with his muscle pain. This caused some social problems for my son at school, where he was more likely to not get along with the other kids, so he got more clingy with me at home. This problem behavior made our interactions more difficult as he became more and more dependent on me. We tried our best to be accommodating, but helping him around the house and modifying the home to increase accessibility. But it continues to prove difficult due to our financial standing, where we can't afford every change possible to alleviate his stress. Our finances have been affected by this diagnosis, as the economic impact has hit us hard because of the medical costs for outpatient and inpatient care, home modifications, and more time away from work in order to take care of my son. Traveling expenses have been collected as Evan's condition progresses as well. Getting him from Burbank to the hospital at Stanford was stressful and expensive. On top of this, we had to install a ramp at the house and pay for new furniture that allowed for a lot of open space for him to get around. We also got a new van, one that can fit his wheelchair, but gas is so expensive. He required special food as chewing and swallowing became increasingly difficult. For a while, the financial stress was simply too much on top of it all. I had to quit my job to be able to care for him full time. I just couldn't keep up. But the team at Stanford has helped us in a financial sense too, with cost estimation tools and financial counseling. They also work with insurance companies to provide the most affordable care. Because of their help, I was able to get insurance coverage and work out a payment plan. His ability to walk slowly but surely diminished. Even though he could still walk, it was so difficult and uncomfortable for him. Most of the time, he chose to use his wheelchair to avoid the discomfort and frequent falls. Even lifting the milk from the fridge was too much. Breathing is also so hard for Evan. He's always struggling to catch his breath. It's so hard to watch. Because of this, most activities are too overwhelming for him. In 2009, we even traveled to the University of North Carolina for Evan to participate in a clinical study to see if transvenous limb perfusion might help with his mobility. We had to stay there for 2 weeks, which was expensive and stressful, and it didn't help much. As the conditions get worse each and every year, we consider different treatment plans and support groups/organizations such as cognitive behavioral therapy and medication treatment. In the chaos of learning to adapt to this new reality, I started researching organizations in search of some support or to find other parents to connect with. I found this amazing organization, Muscular Dystrophy Association, which has been an incredible resource for more information about advancements in clinical trials and progress in the development of new therapies. I have also been able to learn about programs to help connect Evan with other kids going through similar struggles and meet them so that he knows he's not alone and is able to make friends. They have an amazing summer program to help children with muscular dystrophy feel like other kids and do activities they would have never thought they would be able to do, such as ziplining, swimming, and horseback riding, which makes me feel hopeful that Evan is able to have a normal childhood. I have also been able to connect with other parents to get their support and advice as I navigate through the changes and transitions Evan is going through. It has been incredibly important for me to have these connections and talk with people in similar situations because it reminds me that I'm not alone. After attending these support groups, it made me realize how other parents of children with muscular dystrophies face mental health issues. I talked with a mom whose child has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and I heard about her own accounts of her child's disease. I learned that from that mother that caregivers have great parental stress, especially compared to the general population of parents with children without chronic diseases. The main stressors were more about her own child's behavior and interactions with her as it slowly changed as the disease progressed. Since our children with muscular dystrophies are labeled as chronically ill, it makes more stress on the parents to try and manage the progression of their disease, but this overall lowers the stress tolerance for us parents, which can cause poor parenting skills, coping mechanisms, and thereby make it harder to cope with my son having LGMD. I researched that this vicious cycle can play a role in the worsening condition of our sons, thereby placing more stress on us and again worsening their disease. Therefore, it is important to attend these therapy sessions and group talks in order to rationalize our emotions and build healthier habits to deal with these issues so we can inhibit this reciprocal interaction and support one another in our own functioning. I was told about this program called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy that focuses on self-management of accepting the disease and improving our own ability to adapt behavioral patterns that help us focus on personal values despite functional limitations. Acceptance is a huge component of this therapy to accept the negative thoughts and feelings and learn to address our distress and fatigue from caregiving and for our sons to relieve stress from LGMD. This year is Evan's 30th birthday. As I reflect on my son's natural history and his experience with LGMD, I have gained much insight on the importance of focusing on my own mental health throughout this journey as a caregiver. Throughout his life, from diagnosis to today, where he is turning 30 years old, I found through research, doctors, and group sessions that my perception of his disease won't always align with how he views himself. As a parent, I built such a high level of stress and worsened my mental state myself that influenced my own accounts of my son's problems, where in reality, his self-perception was slightly more positive than mine. I realized I had a lower tolerance of frustration and viewed LGMD as a burden to my son's life where I wished he could live as healthy as possible. However, throughout this experience, I also grew more grateful for the time I have been able to spend with my son and focus more on family values. I learned that as long as was supportive, involved in his treatment, and tried to keep a positive attitude throughout his journey, we could have stronger outcomes in his condition. As long as I kept the water running, food on the table, and traveled with him to get treatment, I noticed that this approach and well-functioning schedule can help his condition and build more participation in support groups and both of our overall health. LGMD may have stunted Evan and our family's lives at the start, but we have learned to be accepting of the condition and continue to strive to live a full life filled with memories and experiences. Thank you for listening and watching my Draw My Life.